Now, let's do so by examining the specific names of the Siouan bands like the Tuscarora Croatan that were formally recorded as incorporated into the Tuscarora in the 1713 and 1718 treaties. Hint, if you see any land that says incorporated, that's Indian Territory. Illinois, Chicagoland especially, Chicagoland has incorporated land to this day. If you look at the BMO, you'll see land for 95th and near Avenue O, still unclaimed today for an Amerindian in his Amerindian name, non-European name. Now, to peel back the indoctrination and see the true Confederacy, we have to look at the 1713 and 1718 treaties, which served as the legal death warrant for some bands while forcing others into a hitting merger. Now, under the Haudenosaunee law, I'm going to spell that for you, Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee law, these bands didn't just hang out with the Tuscarora. They were legally grafted into the nation to preserve the original dark-skinned bloodline. Now you see why the Tuscarora had a very, very hard time with recognition. They don't recognize dark skin as tribes. They don't want the original people to own the land. They want the whites to own the land or the mixed breeds. And so over 100, 200 years, 300, 400 years, those whitewash are going to continue to date European, and they, in the end, today become land owned by white people. Their views will be that of their ancestors. Their fight and their voice will be that of their ancestors. All right? That's the purpose of whitewashing. Let's get into the Tuscarora-Wokan, W-O-C-C-O-N, the primary merger. Now, the Wokan were a Siouan-speaking people located between the Neuse, N-E-U-S-E, and the Trent rivers. Historically, they were the younger brothers of the Tuscarora. Post-1713 incorporation. Now, after the fall of Fort Neohoroka in 1713, the Wokan ceased to exist as a separate entity on colonial maps. They were formally incorporated into the Tuscarora, which is the Tuscarora. The shadow surnames. Many of the dark-skinned families who stayed in the area in the swamps, only on the upper Tuscarora in Bertie County, they were reclassified. This left the lower Tuscarora and their Siouan allies, the Chewa, C-H-E-R-A-W, the Kiowa, Kaiawe, K-E-Y-A-U-W-E-E, to be classified as hostile or enemies. You know, the angry black girl or the angry black woman. Those are the type of labels and classifications that when you resist or you speak up or you disagree with something, you are deemed an enemy, a hostile individual. Then you become outcast, or there are ways to get you fired or to be kicked out of the HOA. We have to keep in tune with these labels that were formed back then, continue today. Now, we have the sovereign sanctuary. These groups merged in the settlements like Scuffletown. Because they were on the Bertie County reservation, the state began the paper genocide by labeling these merged bands as free, people of color. as early as the 1790 census to avoid acknowledging their combined treaty rights. Then we have the Meherrin and the Chawanak, which are Algonquin and Iroquois allies. Now, while most Iroquois and Algonquin, these bands were recorded in colonial documents like the colonial records of North Carolina as being under the protection of the Tuscarora. The Meherrin Incorporation, which is the Meherrin Nation, maintained a close, almost identical clan structure to the Tuscarora. When their lands were encroached upon, many families crossed the line and became legally Tuscarora to stay in the Indian woods. There are more than 5 tribes, people. The classification of 5 tribes civilized and deeming others uncivilized, that is nothing more than to degrade those that they haven't brought in as being friendly and non-resistant to the encroachment and the removal. All right. So you have hundreds of years of wars taking place. This wasn't an overnight thing. But then we have the core families of the merger. The Tuscarora Nation of North Carolina records that the following surnames often represent the merger of the Siouan and Tuscarora bands. There are other surnames. Don't get caught up or jammed and stuck and form a brick wall because you're only hearing a few surnames. Locklear, Lowry. You have Lowe, L-O-W-E, that are root words of these names. So you have to be very careful about stifling your ancestral tree. Now, Lockwood Lowry and Brave Boy, viewed by historians as the Siouan Tuscarora core of Robeson County. Then you have Brooks and Jacobs, often linked to the Chawanak and the Meherrin individuals who were adopted into the Tuscarora Bear and Wolf clan. Now, the $5 inversion. Let's see how this plays a part. The government used these mergers to claim the Tuscarora no longer existed in purity. This was the excuse used to allow the $5 Indians, who had zero tribal history, to buy their way onto rolls in the West, while the original dark-skinned families who had legally merged from survival were told their adoption was just racial mixing. If we get into, let me go at this angle. Remember I brought up that the dark-skinned tribes and chiefs were probably taken out when they did, surrender or captured as prisoners of war. And they were actually their identity taken over. If we go into historical records, they will suggest that while many dark-skinned original tribal members were displaced or reclassified, the issue of $5 Indians is more complex than a direct takeover by force. The primary mechanism for displacement was systematic fraud via the Dawes Commission rolls, which functioned to erase original lineages through bureaucracy and legal mechanisms rather than widespread documented killings of chiefs. Then we had the displacement and reclassification. Let's get into that. Let's see what this is about. Now, my research states that paper genocide, which is the core strategy of the bureaucratic system, previously again discussed in my research, shows that families in North Carolina, like the Tuscarora, were systematically reclassified in state records from Indian to colored or mulatto to strip them of legal status and land rights. I can't stress this enough. The forced removals. Many indigenous leaders and their people were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands via the Trails of Tears and other removals, a brutal process that displaced thousands and thousands and thousands and shattered communities. Doesn't mean that everybody went to Oklahoma, because if you put that in your mind that if I'm an Indian, I can't be an Indian because my people didn't go to Oklahoma. You don't know if they went to Oklahoma or not. They could have went to Oklahoma and left Oklahoma, because I've seen that in other people's trees. I've seen it in my trees where they did not stay in Oklahoma. I know Indians that's in my tree and family, Silas Jefferson and other Jeffersons and the Irons that are connected to the Jeffersons, that the Irons actually left Oklahoma and they ended up in Chicago Heights, a whole nother Indian town, Indian land. Chicago Heights, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, south of Chicago. That's Indian territory. And they're documented as Amerindians, black, but they're documented as Amerindians to this day. Now, whether the family kept that designation or not, I don't know, but they definitely are on the Dawes rolls. Now, once you are on the Dawes rolls, your family definitely can claim the indigenous identity. Now, the $5 fraud in leadership, which was about land, not leadership. The primary motivation for the $5 Indians, opportunistic white individuals who bribed their way onto tribal rolls, that's all they were, was access to land allotments, not necessarily takeover of tribal leadership positions. They just wanted the land. They didn't want the titles. They didn't want the designation of being called chief. They didn't want any of that. They just wanted the land. But those on the reservation can't even own their land and property. So what did they gain? Now, if you do research, you'll see many people after the Civil War actually went back to Europe or international. They didn't necessarily stay here. But some of the children that they made by the white women or the whitewashed tribes or the $5 Indians, they stayed. However, many went back to England or to Portugal or Spain or wherever they came from. Many went back. They didn't stay. Now, if we focus on the role of resistance, we begin to paint a picture of what that process was. Now, the dark-skinned individuals who refused to be erased like the Lowry band of Tuscarora descendants maintained their leadership and sovereignty through armed resistance and community solidarity, often operating outside or at odds with the official government recognized structures. The official leadership was sometimes co-opted or replaced by individuals who collaborated with the U.S. government's assimilation agenda, further complicating the issue of who held legitimate power. Ultimately, while violence was inherent in the colonization process, the takeover you describe happened more through legal maneuvering, bureaucratic fraud, and the administrative finality of flawed roles rather than a systematic killing of all dark-skinned chiefs, followed by fraudulent white claimants stepping into their specific roles. The current federally recognized tribes today still use these roles as the basis for citizenship, making the legacy of this fraud a continuing issue. So they are aware of this. They know that this has happened. The government knows those running the tribes that are today on the reservations that are not legit Indians or the original people of the land, those that are the frauds or the wobbles, the pretendians. I'm going to use those terms because that's who they should be directed towards. They think they created it for us, the dark-skinned Amerindians, but I'm using it on them. Now, there are tribes like the Mongolian, Spaniard, Mexicans, who else? The Native Americans modernize those terms I just talked about. My mind always they kind of lean towards that they actually killed a lot of their chiefs off. But I know of instances of reading books like for Kankakee, Illinois, where the chief that lost that land in Kankakee fought the war as much as he could. He survived, but he went to Missouri. So that would be St. Louis and other places where I guess they felt safe. But a Amerindian chief, dark-skinned chief, fought to the end, was removed, went to Missouri, and came back once the land was taken over to see whatever he could see. Probably it was to resonate with having lost the land, or perhaps there was hope of retrieving the land. Seeing what actually took place with it. Had that been a nightmare where maybe whoever was coming in to fight over that Kankakee territory, maybe they left and went somewhere else. So when he came back, he saw that there was nothing he can do to retrieve the land. He rode away on his horse back to Missouri. True story, read it. All right. This was an Indian chief of the land. I believe I read he lived, I'm not sure if it was Joliet or Missouri that he passed away. With no designation as an Indian chief. So he went well into the 1900s. Okay. All right. So, I'm going to get into the process of killing off original tribes. Let me get into that. Now, the process of killing off the original tribes was often a combination of physical warfare and the paper genocide that I discussed with you earlier, where the survivors were legally erased to clear the path for land theft. The shift you see toward more modernized or diverse tribal identities is the direct result of some tragic or strategic administrative and physical displacements. Now, one, we have the physical and paper removal. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the state used a two-pronged attack to displace the original dark-skinned leadership, which led to mass execution and war. Following the Tuscarora War of 1711 through 1715, hundreds of leaders and warriors were killed at sites like Fort Neoherica which is Neoheroka, and thousands more were sold into slavery in the Caribbean. That's reverse slavery, right? That's reverse slavery out. Then we have the sleight of hand. For those who stayed, historians argue the state used a devious sleight of hand to erase their designation as Indians once their land reserves were sold off. By 1831, when the last of the Indian Woods Reserve was sold, the state declared the tribe vanished, even though the families were still living in the swamps. Now, this is a story that my great aunt, well, she's not my great aunt, she's my father's sister, told me. Now, my paternal great grandmother's name is Pocahontas. Pocahontas's mother is a full-blooded Chickasaw Indian from the Indianola area. As a kid, she was taken and removed from her family and sent to Indian schools where she was tortured. When she returned from the Indian schools, she came back to the Indianola, Mississippi area, and there was no land. The land was gone. But they also went into the swamps. So when you hear about the stories of the swamps, they tell you the stories of the Africans running through the swamps. They want you to believe that those were all Africans. There were Indians hiding in the swamps. Those were Indians trying to survive. Those were Indians fighting for their land. Those were Indians being taken and put in our plantations with Africans as well, and blending in, and with Moors thrown in with them as well. All right? A lot is going on during this time. I need you to always, when you are doing ancestry and genealogy and history, to step outside the box. Make sure that you step outside the box and don't pigeonhole people into being what indoctrination has told you a scenario should be. All right? So let's get into the rise of the pretendianism and the $5 Indian. The Mongolian modernized appearance, often associated with modern tribes, is sometimes linked to indigenous identity fraud, often called pretendianism. They are certified. They have became final in their minds, effectively making the fake claimants the legal Indians, while the original families were permanently excluded. Then we have forced assimilation and identity change. For original families who survived, modernizing was often a survival tactic. Conforming to survive meant to avoid forced removal. Many communities changed their appearance, attended Western schools, and abandoned traditional dress to blend in, like those mojo pouches that were on the side, and the blades that were on the side, the moccasin boots, the two braids on the side of the hair braided in two braids. A lot of things changed. Then we have the ethnic amalgamation. Now, in the swamps of southeastern North Carolina, remnant populations of various tribes joined with escaped slaves and poor whites to form hybrid societies like the Lumbee, which the government then used as an excuse to deny them full treaty rights. All they did was just join the Lumbee. The Lumbee are the Tuscarora. So when you have discussions today, those that are in North Carolina that are white or on the reservations don't see the black or the dark skin, let's correct myself, the dark skinned individuals claiming to be American Indians, or those that say that they are Lumbee, they reject them because they already know for survival the poor whites and the Moors and the Africans mixed and mated with the Lumbee. That band, it's only a band. That's the Lumbee is a fraction of the Tuscarora. It has already been explained, the Tuscarora fight and how the Lumbee came to be. Now, if we want to get technical, I can get into having my true ancestry profile and having my raw DNA data with my true ancestry and finding out about the Lumbee tribe. I had never even heard of them. So if my true ancestry tells me about Lumbee, and I do my research 3 years ago after seeing this, and then it connects me to the Tuscarora tribe that I was already investigating, you have to take them for their word that truth was able to come out, is what I'm trying to get at. All right? So it's a matter of doing your own research and getting things verified and clarified by cross-referencing your findings. Now let's examine specific case files of the Cherokee freedmen who successfully sued the federal government to prove their blood quantum was erased due to their skin color. To see the paper genocide in action at the federal level, we look at the legal battle of the Cherokee freedmen. This is the most documented evidence of the blood quantum erasure you are researching, where the government used skin color as a bureaucratic weapon to strip original people of their status while the $5 tribe moved in. First, we have the legal foundation, which is the Cherokee Nation versus Nash. And this is a 2017 court case. The most significant victory came in the case of Cherokee Nation versus Nash, where a federal court finally ruled that the descendants of the freedmen, many of whom were of original dark-skinned Cherokee and Tuscarora descent, were entitled to full citizenship. The blood versus freedmen split. The court examined how the Dawes Commission purposely created two separate roles. If you were dark-skinned, you were put on the freedmen role, and the commission recorded your blood quantum as none, even if your father was a full-blood chief. Then we have the administrative erasure. This zeroing out of blood quantum was a strategic move to ensure that land allotments and future government payments would only go to the blood roll, which was increasingly populated by those who could pass as white or who had paid the $5 bribe.
My ancestors' voices, such an alignment. Welcome to my podcast with your host Lenora, better known as my history verified.